of a cartridge case, that holds the primer powder, the gunpowder, and the bullet. And it's made up of the bullet, which is the thing that comes out of the barrel of the gun that does the damage. Now, we can identify bullets found on the crime scene and found elsewhere. When a bullet travels through the barrel of a gun, there are grooves in the barrel of the gun that impart a spin to the bullet, much like a quarterback throwing footballs, putting a spin on the football. Doesn't help it make it go further, but it helps it make it go straighter. These grooves cut into the soft lead of the bullet, the whole no contact without transfer. The manufacturing process of the gun imparts unique imperfections to the grooves inside a barrel of a gun. These imperfections are transferred to the bullet. They're called lands and grooves. By looking at it under a microscope, a firearms examiner can look at the markings on a bullet, look at the markings made on a test-fired bullet from a recovered gun, and match up the bullets. Now, back in when I started with the crime lab in 1977. Back in 1977 and going back all the way to 1954, if you will, it was the same process that it was then and now. They look at it under a comparison microscope. The only difference is now they take digital pictures of it. Back then, they would maintain what they call an open case file. They would have files of these are the 32 caliber bullets, these are the 45 caliber bullets, these are the 9mm bullets. And when they got a bullet they couldn't identify, they would go to their open cases. And they would say, well, 2 months ago, and that's the same area, we got a similar bullet. Let's see if it matches. Very labor intensive, very time consuming. Now they have what's called an integrated ballistic identification system, or IBIS. The computer does that work for them. They enter the digital picture into the computer. The computer automatically checks all the open cases from which the similar bullet was recovered, and sees if there's a possible match. It comes out with a possible match, and the firearms examiner does the actual identification or actual comparison to see if there's an identification. Same thing applies to cartridge cases. Now, in a revolver, cartridge cases stay in the cylinder, and unless the shooter has to reload, it leaves with the shooter. With a semi-automatic pistol or an automatic weapon, cartridge cases are ejected. Now, when a bullet is fired, it leaves a firing pin impression on the back of the cartridge case. And again, it's a unique marking, so that we can compare cartridge cases found on one crime scene to cartridge cases found on another crime scene. And we can compare cartridge cases found on a crime scene to cartridge cases fired in a recovered weapon. And like with bullets, we can now enter these into a computer system and automatically match up cases so that we're always getting computer matches that help us link one crime scene to another. Now, the way that sometimes works is, let me pass around some cartridge cases and some bullets, or you guys look at these and pass them around to the back. The way it sometimes works is just imagine, just imagine this gentleman here. And this gentleman here, there's somebody he really doesn't like. I'm sure we all have people. And he's decided that the world would be a better place without this person. So he gets a gun and he shoots and kills him. He remembers what I said about matching up guns. So he sells his gun to this gentleman here, who also has somebody he feels the world could be better off. And he shoots and kills him. Now this gentleman here, he hears about these shootings that are suddenly taking place in Africa. You know how many shootings in Africa. So he figures, well, there's been a lot of shootings here. I better get a gun. So he buys the gun that these gentlemen used to, as for protection. And as things happen, he's driving down the road, he's listening to the radio, he's not paying too much attention, he's listening, and he blows a stop sign. And a police officer pulls him over. And as he stops, the gun that he's got hidden under the seat kind of pulls out a little bit. The officer sees the gun and seizes the gun. They take the gun back to the crime lab, and they test it, and they find out this gun has got at least 2 murders on it. Guess who's going to jail? A lot of people don't realize, especially the criminal, they don't seem to realize that when you buy a gun, you're buying every crime that that gun has committed. Buying a gun off the street is a lot like romance these days. You better know where it's been before you start playing with it.
I understand that just cleaning a gun will change the markings.
No.
No?
No. Running a metal rod down the middle barrel of a gun will change the
You mean
markings.
deliberately trying to scrape the side?
Yes, that will change it. Actually, one of the things even though shows like CSI and all that have brought a greater attention to my job, the bad guys watch it too. And we have seen an increase in the use of revolvers ever since these shows up, because revolvers don't leave behind the cartridge cases that semi-automatic weapons do. And if you use a gun in a murder, the smart thing is to get rid of it, because if the police don't get you with the gun, it's very hard to fingerprints off a gun, it's possible, but not likely. DNA off a gun, well, yeah, if you just used it, but once other people start using it, they're going to wipe your DNA off and replace it with theirs. Now, as long as we're still talking about guns, let me talk about how we can possibly determine if someone fired a gun. Now, imagine the process of firing a gun. The gun goes off. When it goes off, it's a small explosion. And it's the primer powder, which is made up of barium and antimony. It explodes. That ignites the gunpowder. And the explosion of the gunpowder is what propels the bullet forward. Well, this powder is there. It's called gunshot residue. And gunshot residue mainly lands on the hand. Now, if you remember the old crime shows, they would always determine, let's do a paraffin test. How many heard about people doing paraffin tests? Back in the 50s and the 60s, and I remember watching the old black and white Perry Mason shows with Raymond Burgess then. And they would do a paraffin test on the suspect's hands. Well, in case you don't know what a paraffin test is, it was pouring some warm or hot wax, depending on how much you like the suspect, on the hands, peeling it off, and then testing it for nitrates. One of the problems with that, other than possible burning of the suspects, if you regard that as a problem, was that it gave a lot of false positives, which means the paraffin test would come back positive even if the person hadn't fired a gun, because it was testing for nitrates, and nitrates exist in things other than gunpowder. By the time I started in 1977, we were doing something called a neutron activation analysis, which involved swabbing the person's hands with a 5% nitric acid solution. Now, nitric acid, 5%, you could drink it with no problems. It was not harmful. But what we would always do is tell the person, don't worry, this won't hurt a bit, and then we would wet the swabs over an ashtray, and when the nitric acid hit the ashes, it would make a nice noise. But we've gone away from that and gone to what we call the GSR test, gunshot residue test. What they do now is they collect the samples using adhesive daggers, and look at it under a scanning electron microscope. And they're looking for the actual particles of unburned gunpowder, antimony, and barium. Now, I know you all know what gunpowder is. Antimony, in case you're wondering, is a chemical element. Barium is what they usually do to the victim of a homicide. Yeah, I know. It's one of my favorites. Now, the way it works is, any volunteers? Everybody's hiding here. Any volunteers? All right, come on. If this gentleman were a suspect in a shooting, and police do this, at least Baltimore City Police